Or bigger than a railway, things like we heard on the decks. Glover hold the court and give the chief no suspect. Politics in the mix, like Gumbo Stewart Rich. Spinning tales from Black Wall Street, real life's the pitch. Johnny Glover Show, be more news. 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 Business tips hotter than lava. Got that Midas touch. Stocks and blocks teaching youngins how to clutch. Ears to the concrete, finger on the pulse. Dropping wisdom like Homer, each word a joke. Johnny Glover Show, be more news. 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 Walls painted black, history on lock. Blast off from Tulsa, rebirth like a clock. Markets rising from ashes to days. Donnie the narrator, truth runs in veins. Johnny Glover Show, be more news. 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 Business tips hotter than lava. Got that Midas touch. Stocks and blocks teaching youngins how to clutch. Ears to the concrete, finger on the pulse. Dropping wisdom like Homer, each word a joke. Johnny Glover Show, be more news. 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 Walls painted black, history on lock. Blast off from Tulsa, rebirth like a clock. Markets rising from ashes to days. Donnie the narrator, truth runs in veins. Johnny Glover Show, be more news. 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 Be news.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover, entered to win it for the long haul, baby. Mafia Shakur, welcome to the show.
Peace, family.
Hannibal James, welcome to the show.
Hey, peace, everybody.
Lars Lee the Fourth, welcome to the show.
Peace, peace, brothers, peace.
I claim Blackfoot, also claim some Puerto Rican roots. How about you, Hars?
I claim Washington / Chitimaca and Chata.
Okay. And how about you, Mafia Shakur?
Cherokee.
And Hannibal?
Este Muskogee Ligi, Piscataway Canoy.
Okay, now I want y'all to meet our special guest for the night. I got a nice introduction. Tonight, we're honored to welcome Dr. Gunther Peck. He is a historian at Duke University, a voting rights activist, and the author of Race, Traffic, Anti-Slavery, and the Origins of White Victimhood, 1619 to 1819. Dr. Peck's work digs deep into how myths of white grievance were created centuries ago and how those same narratives are still being weaponized in American politics today. His recent piece in Made by History lays out how Donald Trump, for instance, his rise isn't something new, but part of a long tradition that stretches back to fabricated stories of white captivity, so-called white slavery. Here on Indigenous, we've been unpacking how history gets rewritten, erased, or manipulated to maintain power, Dr. Peck brings the historical receipts to show us that these tactics aren't just recent inventions, they're recycled strategies that have divided workers, undermined abolition, and weakened multiracial democracy for generations. Dr. Peck, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And it's a real honor to be part of this conversation and to talk about this work and why it matters.
First of all, congratulations. I mean, as a writer, just to get a piece in the Time magazine.
Thank you.
And you kind of went against what some would think a white guy would write.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Well, I'm an historian, and for me, and an activist. So I'm looking like I like what you said in the intro. Like for me, we got it. I mean, I wrote this book, and it took me way back into the past. I have to say, I did not find what I expected, but it was written over, the last decade and a half, in which increasing numbers of people who are white were claiming to be victims. And so I wrote it with the present in mind. Even if I don't even mention, Donald Trump or any of the contemporary story in the book directly, because it ends in 1819, a long time ago. But yeah, I mean, the reason I wrote the book is because I feel like the history of white supremacy is a history of evasion. And it's not just one that involves people who look like me, but there's always been some, I guess I would say, class complexity to the story. And that's part of what the book tries to open up, is that it is this myth of white victimhood didn't just come into being. It was an answer to a very specific anti-slavery, a kind of radical abolition project that was upending the kind of foundations of political economy in the British world in the late 18th century. So, and so that's really when it came into being. And it is seeking to both discipline poor white people, servants and others, but also to persuade them that their lot is really best with white peoplehood, or with a so-called white race, and against the brown and black people that they were actually laboring quite nearby, and sometimes fighting against common masters. So I think that story has not really been fully told or appreciated. We've kind of used the contemporary categories of race and racial boundaries and looked back into the past. But initially, race was not, let's put it this way, Christianity was powerful enough to create enslavements, and it didn't really, it evolved later in response. This is what I didn't expect. It evolved in response to this kind of radical political project that enslaved people, formerly enslaved people, and also trafficked whites were waging together against the powers that be of that time, 1760s and in that period, 18th century. So, and one of the first working, I guess I would describe the article that I wrote in Time, one of the first working class people to kind of embrace white victimhood is a key turning point. And it's this guy, Peter Williamson, who was known as a professional liar. And but he's really interesting because he was politically quite radical. He was protesting the ways in which young children and servants were being trafficked out of Scotland and sent into the New World for 15 years, long contracts to work with no pay. And he was one of those kids. He was kidnapped and sold into what he calls slavery, but he called it white slavery. He's one of the first to call it that. And so he is an angry man, and he used it to indict the shipping merchants that had exploited him And he's a real genuine radical. But what happens over time, and this is the kind of a key moment, is that when he starts talking about white slavery, people begin to respond to that and go, oh, I mean, white people are enslaved. Well, that slavery is, he didn't argue this, but people who heard his story argued this, that, but that's worse than black slavery. So we see this today, and this became a kind of toxic lie that really grew over time. So that white and black are both enslaved, and white slavery is far worse than black slavery. So even as abolition was gaining strength to abolish black slavery, all color, the reaction by the critics of it was to say, well, white slavery is worse than black slavery, and that was a way to divide the anti-slavery coalition. I think that's the gist of the whole 400-page book. But anyway, I welcome you to there's more in there, and I'm happy to elaborate more. But so that story, it wasn't. I also would say the thing that surprised me most was it wasn't a foregone conclusion that that I guess this idea, it's a really unlikely idea that of white victimhood would be successful, because it is. I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that there were not people who looked like me who were I'm not saying there were not slaves. There were people who looked like me who were enslaved in the past. But here's the key. They were not enslaved because they were white. And that's a key difference with black slavery. That's right. So, skin color became a badge of enslavement for African descendant people, and through the lineage of the mother. So that's how the whole African slave trade was sort of organized. That's how slavery was legalized in North America, through the inheritance of if the mother was enslaved, then the children were. No white slaves' children were ever enslaved. So if you want to, but people were making this comparison in the past between indentured servants who were kidnapped and kidnapped Africans. And the thing is, if you put those two groups together, it was they were the majority by far. And so keeping them divided was key to how the political economy worked, and also how the meaning of racial victimhood emerged. So the other thing was that the other thing. So does that make sense, Sonny? Tell me what you're making of it. I'm welcome to thoughts or questions. It was not what I expected. I will tell you that. My book, I was going to try to. When did the language of whiteness come into being? That's what I was interested in. And this is not what I expected. I expected the first whites were convicts. The people who were sold out of the jails of London or Ireland and were transported to the New World. To be a white or a black was to be a thing. And so who had power? Christians had power. And so there's this really intense language that I found in the discourse about colonial planters saying, well, we brought in our Christian servants to put down the rebellion of the whites and blacks. That was not what I expected. So the earliest language of skin color for whites was, it denoted that they were bought and sold. Not the same as blacks, because that was perpetual slavery. Theirs was for a period of years. But it was a sign of a sign of being a thing, and so no one wanted to be known by skin color. You wanted to be a Christian to have rights, which is one of the reasons why, very quickly enslaved Africans also became Christian, because that was a way of gaining power. And then it's partly that transition that made the story of skin color have to become more salient. White had to be elevated. When enslaved Africans became Christian, it was a threat. So in effect, you had to say that the white race had to be invented. So this idea then, so it came about in kind of in reaction to collaborations among enslaved and trafficked, and there were a lot of more collaboration, I think, than we sometimes see and remember. And so this mythology of white victimhood was built in response to the kind of power from below. And the one, you can see that in Barbados, in some of the language of the way they describe the rebellions of servants and slaves and enslaved people. The first, I was looking sort of, when did whiteness then become a language of power for, what we would call today white privilege? And I want to almost make it really clear. What I found is, I don't mean to diminish in any way what the work that white skin color does today. Obviously, it matters. I'm not trying to I'm critiquing this that work today. But the origins are complex, and they speak to the kind of it was invented by elites too. That's the other part. Like today, we condescend to working class people a lot by saying white working class racists. That's the sort of a lot of the energy about racism. There are plenty of white working class racists, but it's not like working class people invented racism. It was imposed on them, and they were kind of given bad bargains. So this Peter Williamson figure is one of the first working class people to claim whiteness as status, but he was a political radical. He then gets kind of misinterpreted by others to say, well, white suffering is worse than black. And it's the idea of white suffering that really is born in the late 18th century that continues on. It's that idea that the white race suffers more than black people, which is just a crazy lie. But that is the genesis of so much violence and so much racism moving forward. The Klan, that's their whole justification, right? And the idea of white virtue and white victimhood has a very long and productive, tragically a productive ideological life.
One thing you said to me yesterday was about the collaboration in terms of was it insurrections? Was it the fear of indentured servants and enslaved peoples rallying together?
Straight up, yeah. So you see that in a lot of these were not successful or necessarily big scale rebellion. You see it in the correspondence of planters back to London, and they say things, we're worried about, we have to bring in more hired servants. Hired servants would be Christian servants against the whites and blacks. That's the language that's being used. And so there is a servant slave rebellion, a couple of them in, where they have common masters. There'll be an abusive master. They're working. No one's getting wages. And they're trying to, so that rebellion of the trafficked, those who are bought and sold, is what is generating some of the changes in status. So whiteness becomes a kind of source of some rights over time, but it's not born that way. So some of the first white rights in places like Barbados are, and this is crazy, there's a crazy language, but in 1704, the governor of Barbados, the attorney general from England, writes a letter worrying that the servants have become white slaves. This is before Peter Williamson, and that they might be, if you treat them badly, in effect, they're going to be in rebellion. And so the Edward Steed, who's the governor of Barbados, writes back and says, well, they're not. He insists that white servants are not slaves because they have the right not to be dismembered arbitrarily, which is like a really grim language. But the first white right is the right, you can be dismembered, but not without a proceeding. But if you were black, you could be dismembered. So the cruelty, the weight against enslaved people is profound, but much of that same power was used against servants as well. On Barbados and Virginia initially doesn't really rely too heavily on enslaved Africans. It moves to initially indentured servants, and then after Bacon's Rebellion, when enslaved and trafficked servants rise up together, that then they turn to the African slave trade in the 1680s. So it is that some of the first laws of slavery, you all probably know this, but I didn't know this. Some of the first laws that legalize slavery are trying to create different punishments for the indentured servants who run away from the enslaved. So they're trying to codify harsher penalties, for enslaved for running away than for indentured servants. So that it's out of that stew, out of that possibility and that practice of people combining, that white identity emerges. And it's initially, it takes about it takes more time than we think to become a language that actually unites people who look like me potentially into a single coherent or sort of coherent group politically. Whites have always been divided. No way of saying it. Yeah, and I think the way racial hierarchy is white supremacy, the language of white victimhood works. It tries to persuade poor whites, don't think of yourself as a poor person. Pay attention to your status, your victimhood as a white person, not as a traffic servant or not as a worker. And that's the identity that it's seeking to kind of persuade people. So, and that's what I found. And it's a sad story. It's a tragic history, but it's also full of heroes. I did not expect to find as much brilliance and daring and ambition, and like some of these abolitionists, people like Phyllis Wheatley and obviously well-known, a lot of Aquilano, but also some of these lesser-known white actors who were staunchly abolitionists, staunchly against buying and selling, and they refused race altogether. They refused the language of race by saying we want freedom, or we are radical Christians. That is the sort that is the anxiety that was being. Those are the people who were being contested. Anyway, I'm talking too much, y'all. Ask me questions because I'm happy to try to explain. Does this make sense, or does it? Maybe you already knew this. I'm curious.
Yeah, I think that is. My name is Hannibal James, and I think it's a little couple of intricacies that's probably that you might be unaware of or you might left out. I know like in Virginia, Maryland, around the 1660s, it was an issue with indentured servants. Well, let me back up. I know that the English was classifying so-called Scottish and Irish people as Negroes. It's called the race diagram, and it shows the Caucasian, it shows the Irish person, and it shows the Negro side by side. It's from the 1800s. Here's another point where it was a problem with a lot of indentured servants running away when you look into the court cases, especially the women, because they were getting raped and they was getting beaten. Then they was having black children. So the indentureship, once they start having these black children, they start getting like 10 years. The woman to get 10 years as a slave or indentured servant, or her child to get forever. The guy, the male, whether it's a Native American or African, he'll get 10, 20 years. But this was the Catholic Church and like these Christian entities you talk about. You talk about Barbados. Another point you made about Barbados. I know about the time around 1619, it was a skirmish or something with England and Ireland. And I know that England was Shanghaiing folks. And I know that they were taking white women and the older teenage women down to Barbados to the guy who in the book you talk about white slaves, you talk about these sex plantations. Now, they was breeding these women So it's a lot. It's things that we glimpse over, and that is. But the story is, if we're gonna tell it, we got to tell it all. You know what I'm saying?
That's
I
true.
understand where you're coming from, but it's little intricacies like that when you look into like the Jesuits and what they were saying about these Irish folks or these indentured servants. You know.
Yeah. I think the Irish story. Excuse me. Well, thank you for bringing that. Those are really powerful parts of that complexity. I mean, I'm trying to forgive me if I'm making it. If I'm skipping over some of that rich history because I don't mean to. I mean, it's a lot of that's in my book, but the Irish are particularly interesting because they were colonized by the British at the same moment that the New World is being exploited, and so it is the so-called Redlegs, they were called, the Irish. I mean, Cromwell invaded Ireland and it just transported a lot of people to the New World. And so the Irish were definitely part of a colonial forced labor project. What is particularly tricky and vexing about that story, though, is that the Irish were not, I mean, I don't want to so recently, and I would say in the last half century, last 30 years even, a lot of Irish, some Irish American racists have really taken hold of this idea that the Irish were enslaved. And so they have this argument about Irish slavery. And they say, and there's one, I had this poster I was going to share with y'all, but my computer's not working. But it shows, it says the letters are, they were Irish and they were enslaved far worse than any black slavery in history. And it's written letters over a Confederate flag. And so what they're saying is, some of these Irish nationalists, is that Irish slavery was way worse than African enslavement. And so they're making it a clear comparison, and they're creating a hierarchy. It's a zero sum, kind of like where ours is.
Yeah, I agree with you on that point when you said that.
But they're using white victimhood. That's the point. They're and they're missing the fact that the Irish, many of them, were working with enslaved Africans to fight for freedom.
Yeah, a lot of the Irish bought into the separation, like you said, that the planners were worried about the unification between these Irish and these slaves, so they came up with that terminology of being white in the 1662. I forgot what's the name of the case.
1662 is when that's a key case when it's when reproduction is made, like in Virginia. Where the mother's child, if the mother is enslaved, her child is enslaved.
Right.
But the language of whiteness it hasn't even arrived yet. It's not until the 1680s. It comes later. Like, you won't find, the only whites you find in the English language, weird, are these convicts, and that's in the 1670s. And then also whites are described Muslims who are being trafficked. So it's not what I expected there. But what happens after is so interesting. Then it's like a great example of the Irish black, I guess I would call it possibility, is another example of it is in the New York City's Servant Slave Rebellion in 1741. And the key ringleaders are these two people, an Irish servant named Peggy, who was in love with an enslaved African named Caesar. We don't know his name beyond Caesar. And they were the ringleaders of the Servant Slave Rebellion. And there were a bunch of buildings were being burned down on the waterfront. And there was a kind of investigation after these fires were started. And they uncovered a plot in which this Irish and enslaved cohort were seeking freedom, and they were seeking to find common to gain the strength, to gain the cooperation of the Spanish, and to kick the English out of New York City. And and what's so interesting, but it was an Irish black kind of conspiracy, and then there were a whole bunch of people were convicted, and a whole bunch of people were hung. But the prosecutor, a man named Daniel Horstman, tried to get everyone to confess to a crime, that the plot was to kill all the white people. And if you confess to that, you'd save your life. So a lot of people who were, charged with plotting this conspiracy said, yeah, it was all about trying to kill white people. But that about 30 people who refused, i.e. the ringleaders, refused to say that. And what they said as they're about to be hung or burned at the stake, it's about freedom. That was the plot. And they had a vision of sailing with the Spanish to, of all places, a place of freedom, which was the Great Dismal Swamp of North Carolina.
I just want to pose a question.
Yeah.
So how does the race, language, and whiteness correlate to the political order, as far as in a white man being a free person a free person in law, and a black man being a dead man in law? And how does that relate to race, language, and the translate from the British Empire and all that?
So this is what I was sort of surprised by. That is what you summarized it beautifully. Like that is clearly in place by the late 18th century. But for a long time, it's Christians who had power, Christian servants who had rights, and whites and blacks were not. So like white peoplehood takes a while to emerge. And even when whiteness becomes a site of political power, of freedom, like to conflate those, there are all these unfree whites. And so it's not enough to just like assert that white people have something in common, their skin color. That doesn't address the anxiety that trafficked whites or servants might rebel. So it's this idea of white suffering that is the thing that becomes persuasive to people. I guess that's my argument, is that the white race, the idea of a unified white race, only becomes really persuasive when people believe that white people suffer because of their skin color, which is a lie.
Yeah, because to my knowledge, it's like Irish and Scottish and these people was just accepted into whiteness, the white class. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but not not initially. That's the thing. So like they weren't considered to be, and this is the whole discourse about the Irish not being white. I mean, they were like, I can't remember. Yeah, like they were described, the N-word was used to describe the Irish in the early 19th century. And they were discriminated against, but they did have the right to vote. That's key.
Can I intervene? Can I intervene for a second?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I appreciate you coming on, man, and I like your studies, but I do want to let it be known that I think that we confuse these people. The Caucasian Irish and the Caucasian Scots as original Irish and Scots, they're converts. The same way that the majority of those people who are classified as Jews are converts. They're not crypto. If they're not crypto Jews, or if they're not the original Irish or the original Scots, then they're only converts into the Scottish so-called. It's just like me being born in China. Then I can literally say I'm Chinese by nationality, but by bloodline, I would only be a convert into the Chinese nation. That's the first thing. The second thing is that that was one of the main reasons why those Irish and they weren't considered white until what was it? It was the Irish, it was the Jews, and it was the Italians as well. They weren't considered white until 1950 something.
Yeah, a lot.
And as far as and I hear people always speak on the African slave trade. That particular slave trade is mythological in its origin. There were no 350 years of people going to Africa, getting 12.5 million slaves and transporting them on 35 to 40,000 ships over the course of 350 years.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So the people that were here in this land on Turtle Island, that were considered slaves were basically prisoners of war on their own lands.
Yeah. No, I think that's powerful, and I also think, I mean, this is where like I'm part of what I wanted to, and I'm trying to straighten out, and this is hard work because there's a lot of complexity to the history itself, but there's no question that the systematic enslavement of Africans, it just dwarfs any other coerced migration in history.
But when you say Africans, who are you talking about?
I'm talking about people out of Central and West Africa, out of Senegambia, and
that's what I was saying. Is that we were told that there were approximately 12.5 million people transported from Africa to North America over the course of 350 years by way of 35 to 40,000 slave ships. That didn't take place. The majority of those particular transportations of people of our skin complexion mostly came from this region and were transported over into other parts of Europe. But so far as people being transported from Africa over the course of a 350-year period on gas chambers, which they call slave ships, it didn't exist, and it would have been impossible.
Well, I mean, we might differ there. I think that, like, I mean, it's pretty well documented, but that's okay. I guess, I mean,
well,
you're right.
Let me help you out right here.
Yeah.
So this is about where we probably are gonna go astray, and I wanted to thank you for sharing what you did. Yeah. And I hope that we have gotten out of it. Mafia, don't you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just including, like, you know,
I mean, because he is a guest, and
listen, I can take any criticism you want. It's all good. I mean,
it's not criticism.
Yeah,
you are about to be introduced to some facts, and it's quite contrary. So, Mafia, go ahead.
I hear you. Okay,
and welcome, Top Cats, Big Chief.
That's why I was bringing up the topic of, you know, the word white. You know what I'm saying? Because white deals with the law aspect, you know, and being freed in law. And, you know, when we talk, like Horace was just saying, the Black Europeans, all these people come from a melanated source. So the titles, once the titles was overthrown by the religious aspect, the religious aspect of the war, the religion was the political power and the military force. So through those things is which the power structure came to overthrow these people of the native lands. See, when we talk about enslaved Africans, we still not talking about slavery in America or the war that was in America, you know, the Gullah Wars, and when the land was overthrown.
Yeah. That's so. I mean, well, linking those up is really interesting. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, one thing that I guess I just wanted to maybe try to clarify, like, and this, like, whiteness in law was, it took a while to be defined as a privilege. And you can see it in 1790 is a good example of this. The naturalization law that allows any, people who are new to the United States now, the U.S. nation, to become a citizen. You can naturalize if you're free and you're white. But they have both of those words. They don't just say white. The reason being that there are a lot of whites who are unfree, and they're not allowed to naturalize.
But isn't a North African white?
Yes, and North Africans are considered white. They were considered white by census takers, but then it was very and so this, who gets to control the category of white is a really interesting political history. So some groups are not considered, who are phenotypically white are not considered white. My favorite example of this are Finnish Americans. This blew my brain. So in the 1900 census, Finns, these are Northern Europeans. They're blonde, blue-eyed, whatever. They're not put down, the census takers didn't put down white. And the reason they didn't is because they were They didn't want them to naturalize. So they didn't want them to vote. And the reason is because they were politically radical. The Finnish immigrants come into the country and mostly go into the upper Masabi Range in Minnesota. And they were syndicalists. They believe in socialism. And that the people doing the census work, but we don't want them in our country. So we don't want to give them the right to vote. So they're not white. So
let's hear from our let's hear from our guest that's just coming in. Shout out to Brother Wells coming in as well.
Hey.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, one of the things is this.
Yeah.
That I've noticed. And having, you know, been in, you know, Ivy League schools and this, that, and the other, you know.
Yeah.
That, you know, we kind of naturally take for granted that the information that we're getting is accurate because whatever, it's history 101, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then when I discovered, I said, well, who would have founded a Brown University or whatever, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then you see the bent, right? So recently I asked AI a question.
Uh-oh.
just to give you an idea.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but it was an elaborate question. So then they gave me a response, right? So then I said, well, what are your sources for this, right?
Yeah.
And then they quoted, you know, whatever, university or this, that, or whatever. But I'm saying if the structure of the university's origin was to suppress the information for their value, right? You and me are in a difficult situation because we have to be able to put a fine tooth comb on that. So in other words, when we're talking about race and stuff like that, who is making that determination? You feel me?
Yeah, no, I hear you. And that is
so the relationship of the for lack of a better word, Native American, right?
Yeah,
is going to be qualitatively different.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
From a European bit, even though, you know, that person has the alkaloids of being a scholar. So that's the hard part. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of times when I'm discussing stuff with different people, I say to them, I say, well, have you ever read a book by a Native American, or have you ever read a book by a black person? So how the fuck excuse me, how can you come out here and say that this is the truth, you know? So that's a question. That's
a good question.
Inquiry, rather. That's an inquiry. Yeah.
That's inquiry. Yeah. So I appreciate that question because, like, how do we know what we know? Straight up. And like, I mean, I can tell you. So, I mean, I guess the short answer is that, I mean, I spent 22 years researching this book, and I read thousands upon thousands of pages of correspondence in across Great Britain and, you know, North America, looking, and I was trying to find, when did people who look like me begin referring to themselves as white? Because you get far enough back in time, they didn't. They were known as Christians. They were known as Scots, or they were known as Irish, or they were known as Englishmen, or what have you.
Where did you come? I apologize for just.
Yes, sir. Let's get a word from Top
So let me give him a proper introduction. Dr. Gunther Peck of Duke University. Meet Dr. Legendary Big Chief Top Cats of Houston.
Hey,
how you doing, Brother Gunner? I'm curious to know. You said after your 20 years of research, what conclusion you came to? Because I was under the impression that white is not biology; it's ideology.
Straight.
So, you know, in the colonial term, you spoke about the 1790 Naturalization Act. We also have at that time the people who were known as Irish. I heard you speak of them, Scots, Swedish, Italians, an increase of mankind by Benjamin Franklin, 1777. He speaks about all of them being dark complected people, swarthy, and he didn't want to bring them over to the Americas. We also have a opinion saying that the Indians that he met in Pennsylvania reminded him of the people of England, not Africa, because of the dark skin. I say to say through my research, we even find that the kings of Europe, if we're going to come through from the, I mean, we can go down from King Edward Woodstock all the way down, or the Norman invasion. Each king and queen was melanated. The Stuarts, who founded the Virginia Company in London, 1606.
Yes.
Virginia. Yes, sir. The Stuarts. King Charles II is the black boy king. I just come from Europe in Litchfield.
Yes.
In Litchfield, 3 hours, about an hour and a half outside of London. They actually have a statue of him as a melanated man. Oliver Cromwell is one of my late grandfathers, so I'm into medieval time history. Yeah, the second daughter Elizabeth is one of my great grandmothers.
Wow.
Yeah, so are you familiar with Dr. David Iltis?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Can I play a clip? OG Donnie, you mind if I play a clip?
Big brother, come on with it.
Okay, so I had the privilege to sit down with Dr. David Iltis, and
wow. Awesome.
I'm up. You gotta bring that up, OG.
I gotta pull it up. My bad.
Of America.
Yeah, that's for sure.
4 million people that are speaking about during the time of the
offspring would also be
people of America.
Yeah, that's for sure.
4 million people that are speaking about during the time of the Civil War, 1866, or 14th Amendment, which Trump is using right now as his primary. He's using the 14th Amendment, birthright citizenship. 4 million people, as he said, it was to women and children of slaves. So I don't think that would include European, because in my family, slave schedules, my grandfather, his family came from Switzerland back in the 1700s, but he married a Cherokee Indian. Now, the Cherokee Indian is his wife, but she is listed as his slave, and their son is listed as the slave as well. But he being of European stock, he's not. So that takes me also in the writing, in that legislation, it was written that it was for Indians not taxed, or Indians who basically left their tribe and became U.S. citizens. So, and it also made sure that it said that the aliens were not included, the illegals, which would be considered the African in the situation, because in America, not until 1870, the Africans get ability to even own land or anything like this. So this would have to be talking about the indigenous people of America. Yes. Say to that.
Yeah. So I agree.
Another thing I noticed, you spoke about the slave ports, the actual slave ports where they were coming from. And in my research, I'm not finding, I've seen some numbers, which were a lot, but when we look into the European, it's not taxonomy or race in it, because it was both. And we can see that through the military road, the militia road, also through the Jacobite gleanings, where we see the Jacobite defenders of the Stuart Kings. Some are fair skinned, some are swarthy, which would be dark skinned, some are actually labeled them as dark skinned. I want to go here. Are you familiar with Jeremy Belknap of Boston?
I'm not. No.
Belknap wrote 40 letters on the inquiry of merchants and other prominent persons who had been active during the late colonial period. On the basis of interviews, documented evidence, he came to the conclusion that African trade was never greatly prosecuted to a great extent by the merchants of Massachusetts. I cannot find more than 3 ships a year belonging to this port were ever employed in the African trade. Now,
that sounds about right.
Okay, so if you add the American Indian into the story, the Europeans for the indigenous servitude, the numbers that they speak about on the Africans, we actually see a European for the European side. This is Gaddison. His estimates was 300,000 to 400,000. That was 1780. Most migrants went to the West Indies. I'm closing out now. New England received 2% until the Virginia Company in London. And so the treatment of indentured servants has been the subject of much debate and discussion. If runaways as an indicator, then treatment was bad. In the 18th century, there were ads in newspapers describing runaways saw by masters. This is where Brother Sword, he's going with the, how do we differentiate the two? Now, chattel slavery. Okay, I stopped it there, but my point that I wanted to get was, the kings who gave the charters. I'm not into the taxonomy. I heard you earlier say that, they try to make white people the creator of all of this, and I see it another way. The people that were in power were people that looked like us. Here's King James right here. We get from the Court of Queen of Matthew writing. Page 40, he writes Charles was dark-skinned. He was named the Black Boy King after Henrietta Maria, his mom, who also whispered the start the War of Roses, coming from the Medici family. They funny, but I land there. Yeah, what's your thoughts?
It's really interesting. That's a. Where was that interview? When did that happen?
It happened about a month, a month and a half ago. Okay. He actually want to use some of the data that we have, that I have found concerning the American domestic slave trade, which went from the colonies over to the West Indies. And that was my thing. The numbers that they speak about for Africans, this 12.5 number, that he had to even say himself in 1970 on the census, there were less than 1% of Africans in the U.S. The major focus of the slave trade would have been in Spanish or Portuguese America, South America, Brazil,
That's right. Yeah, they didn't know, and they certainly didn't. Yeah, no, people didn't come directly to the United States, or because that
they West Indies. But we do know from we can go from the Mohegan War if we want to start from the first one. Peter Manute and them, the West Indies Company. You'll get and then you get the Mohegans versus the Mohawks, and then you get the Queen Anne War, 1701, 1703, by the Tuscaroras, Pequot Wars. But all of these wars are sending prisoners of war over to the West Indies. But it's the same story that they're telling us happened with Africans. But instead of the African, it's really the European, because even on slave voyages, the methodology shows us that they can prove 5 million voyages coming from Europe to the West Indies without ever going to Africa. But they don't have the data for African. They don't have the data for the African narrative. But they can fill in the holes and have the captains, the names of the ships, and yes, sir, these manifest. But they don't find the African.
So I don't. I mean, I have to say I didn't. David Elsis is he is one of the.
Yeah, he's one of the top.
I mean, he's done more on that database and made it public, so you can search it. What records do exist? It's pretty much what Eltis and others have done. He's not doing it alone. He's doing it with teams of research. But no, I mean, I think you're absolutely, everything you're saying makes sense. It's a global, and I also think we get sometimes the terms get. One of the things I discovered in my research, I also looked at the Atlantic, I looked at the Mediterranean. Right. The Mediterranean's a really different story, especially when it comes to race. So one thing, I guess, I don't know, maybe I wonder if maybe what I'm saying is.
I would ask you what time frame we're in. We're looking at.
Yeah, 1619.
Okay, 1619 in the Mediterranean. Okay.
1619 to 1819 is the 2 centuries I tackled. And so in the Mediterranean, like it's the trafficking of people. Everyone's trafficking. Like Europeans are trafficking North Africans and vice versa.
Right.
Kind of all the time. People are flowing in east, west, north, south. There are a lot of African people working in the Mediterranean throughout.
North African.
I mean, the Mediterranean includes North Africa. So like,
yeah, so that's why instead of the West African narrative they give us, they overlook the presence of the North African, which is very clear, especially when we see with the conquistadors or the Sevilles, or the Castilians.
Yeah, and it makes the counting questions a little more complicated, to be sure. But the thing that I think, maybe I'm curious what you all think about this, because this is what I discovered. And again, I did not quite expect this, so I don't know if I tried to make sense of it in my book, but that think of the work that race does and the work that skin color do. Skin color is not the same as race historically.
Right. Yeah. Taxonomy, call it is.
It's just a taxonomy. It was a way of counting people. It was a way of buying and selling people, and it didn't mean that it didn't have the same meaning that it does today. That it acquired over time by the definitely in the late 17th century and early 18th century. There's a longer period there, and so in the Mediterranean, it doesn't. You actually want to get bought and sold because that's how you get back. You want to be ransomed. So if you're captured by someone else in a boat, they're going to sell you for ransom, and that's how you made money. You're trafficking people. And so the goal was to, if you were enslaved, was to pay. You'd try to get people to pay your ransom if you had people who could.
Yeah, and if you did, it would be an indentured servant contract, most likely.
Yeah, and if you didn't, you ended up in what was called galley slavery. You were working; it was just the hardest thing in the Mediterranean. But it's not the same system as
the U.S. or colonial, the Western.
Sugar and then later cotton and
molasses and things of that nature.
So I mean, but they do kind of come together over time. So that's the other thing I found is that it doesn't. They have relationships. There are people moving between Atlantic and Mediterranean throughout the whole period. So I mean,
can I make a quick statement right quick?
Yeah, jump in.
I think that the people get confused between the terms race, nationality, and bloodline. They're three different things.
Yes.
For starters, race is people who are racing for the land, for the resources, and for the wealth. Mm-hmm. Just like the people in this land who are classified as blacks or African Americans, if you want to be politically correct, we're not in the race. Because just like Dr. Claude Anderson said that we own 0.01% of the nation's wealth for the last 150 years. So we're most definitely not in the race. Therefore, in all terms, we couldn't even possibly be racist if we wanted to, because it couldn't affect anybody in their economics or any other matter. Now, when it comes to dealing with nationality, we're talking about a system of paperwork that was brought over here by the conquistadors and the smart guys from England to start classifying people under their European and Roman legal system, dealing with their language and legalese. And now we're dealing with bloodlines. We're talking a whole different ball game here. So a lot of people start claiming these names that are associated with the bloodlines, but they don't even have any ties to the bloodlines, only the names.
Well, sometimes they do, because one of the things we have to understand is after 1788, after the Compromise Act, 1877, you would have wealthy Negro families breed into white families, and the white families would take power. A great example I always like to give is a guy named Daniel Murray out of Washington, D.C. Daniel Murray trained his protege. His protege ended up being his boss, and they demoted him. So what he did was went back and wrote, and he was into the Niagara movement, all of these movies that led up into the NAACP, Joel Springham. His brother went to Harvard, met W. Du Bois, how they brought him up. Anyway, but this guy, Daniel, he goes back and write a book on the bloodlines of these people, of all these wealthy Negro families that hid their crime by breeding into white families and hiding the wealth that they had stolen from people here. At that time in Washington, D.C., after the Civil War, Washington, D.C. was all melanated. Wealthy melanated family. People don't like to talk about the free Negroes here. Yeah, we can go back to the 11 Africans that they say they brought into New York. Those 11 Africans, which had Anthony Portuguese, and they've been living in Portugal this whole time, but they end up getting their freedom. And but my point to it is they made a buffer zone between them and the Indians. But when I went back to the records they got patents. And the patents have free Negroes. The captain, John DeVries, or Warren DeVries, he's the captain. He's a free Negro and he's Portuguese. But they to us as if they were white to race baiters. And that's something that we can't bet, because the story isn't being written by them. The story being written by someone like you. Your teacher, pretty sure look like you. Your pastor, I'm pretty sure look like you. So after the Civil War, they put a lot of what happened on the British, when the truth is the U.S. that was created in 13 colonies was a collaboration of American Indians who had a government who had government already before they got here.
The Iroquois.
Yes, the Haudenosaunee, where you had the Onondaga and the Onondaga who helped form the Constitution, the laws, Articles of Confederation, and the Constitution. You get that in H. Res. Cons. 331, where they acknowledge, the U.S. acknowledged that the Iroquois helped create it. They created it after what's called the Great Law of Peace. And so, I wouldn't say in a victim way, because all the way up into and now Abraham Lincoln, me and him share the same grandma, Nancy Hanks, from Virginia to Kentucky, down to Alabama to Texas. So that Hanks line, that Shifley line, but which is actually take you back to the Plantagenets and the Plantagenets, the Tudors, and also the Ruiks. If anybody know about the Ruiks who took over the Vikings that took over Russia. Anyways, I say I land on this. I wouldn't make it into a race or someone did something to us. You have to understand the people that did this looked it like you, and so that's why it's important for us to know our bloodline, because if you know who you are and your story, we can get a better understanding on the past and what actually took place, instead of going by what these institutions have put out propaganda, to race bait or put each other against, as we've seen in the 20th century. Once Ellis Island and they were coming over and integrate, and they used the work in 1869. They had the labor conventions, but as they grew on, used these labor conventions in order to put the white against the blacks, and then
I think that's a lot of history. I mean, I think what I loved about what you just said is you actually summarized really effectively the really different ways this idea of race has worked. It's been skin color, it's also been nation, and it's also been bloodline. So and I think, and in some ways it's the relationship of those different ideas of race that I'm trying, and my book I'm just sort of explaining the origins of. So when I started the beginning of my story, when you look at the language of race as what does race mean? The word race. In the mid 1600s, and you'll see it most commonly connecting lineage, like the Tudor race or the Annesley race They're talking about particular. They're talking about bloodlines, right? Usually,
exactly. Bloodline. Everything is about the bloodline. Yes.
They're not talking about the white race. They're not talking about a black race here, right? So that comes quite a bit later. So, and I think what's really and then right, nations are races, and that's like totally true. That's even true today. I mean, people still think
it was even true that before the event of the colonizers, race between black and white was almost the same equivalent of saying rich and poor.
Yes,
because you had the crypto Jews who were known also as the Moranos, who were over in Europe, and one book that's pinpoints this, very articulately is the history of anti-Semitism.
Mm-hmm.
So even in that book, it explains how this particular bloodline of people, even though they could have been mixed, they could have been mulattoes. Some were, our color, copper color, and then some were, 100% Caucasian. But they were a specific class of people who were pretty much running the show, and who probably pretty much running the show now. They're pitting all of the people against each other while they're sitting behind closed curtains eating caviar and who knows what else.
Well, that is happening, but we do have to understand, like, even when you're speaking about the Medano, I heard you say cryptos. You have the cryptos, but we'll go back to the Alhambra decree because you spoke about the Medanos. The real Christopher Columbus was actually a Medano.
True.
Yeah, he was a Medano. His family, his real name is Sir Ferdinand Salvador Zarco.
Yeah, Columbus is a title. It's not a name, right?
And he was support his mother's side was supporting Jew. So his mother married the first, second Duke of Basia, who was Alfonso the fourth brother. So if you go to them, their grandfather bloodline is John the Gun. John the Gun is Henry the Navigator them's grandfather. So John, y'all don't know who John the Gun is. John the Gun, his son was George, and this is what's going to start the war because he took over power from Richard II. I think he just left London, and I took a picture next to Richard II at Westminster Abbey. So yeah, I wouldn't say I wouldn't just lump it all into one, but yeah, we do have the Medanos, and we do know 1517 Martin Luther, rebelled against it. Then John Calvinists come, and then we have the Protestants, and that movement is gonna, the explosion of the Protestants. They're gonna come here. They're gonna go through eastern parts, even South Africa, and become the Boers. There, BOERS, which they had the war 1898. And they also fought alongside Hitler in World War II with the Nazis.
Hey, Top Cat, I got to ask you a question, brother. When you said about not lumping them into one, well, the only reason why that I was lumping them, so to speak, into one is because of this priesthood of the ones who could have been considered Scots or many other different names. Like Morenos was just, I thought it was a Latin term for Moors, as well as, like the Akenazis or the Zionists.
Yes, sir. Well, the Morenos, they were the ones, even the wealthy family. That's why they said Queen Isabel and Ferdinand paid for the voyages for Columbus, which is totally false. The truth is they put them in contact with a guy by the name of Patrick Maguire. And that's why if we go to Ireland, there's a historical marker there that says Christopher Columbus came here and met an Amerindian man who changed his life. Well, y'all look this guy up, Patrick Maguire. Patrick Maguire. If you have a Mac on it, you're gonna, he's Irish, but he's gonna have some Scottish in there because the Macs come from MacDubs. Comes from the MacDubs family or dynasty, starting off with
that's the Black King, right?
Gave me and I'm sorry for that. Malcolm. No, Kenneth. I'm sorry, Kenneth.
Is that where you get the last name Douglas and stuff like that from?
McDonald's, Mac, it just means son of Doug. And
right.
Doug meant dark skin, at the same time. Yeah, but I wouldn't group them because that would be Portuguese line. Columbus was actually from Portuguese. So in Cuba, Portugal, they have a 7-foot statue of him under his real title, which would be Ferdinand Salvador Zarco, and he takes his mother's name. His dad is, or her dad is Giles Zarco, Columbus' grandfather, who was right-hand man to Henry the Navigator, who helped clear out the Moors. They fought against the Moors, and that is what turned Portuguese towards West Africa, the Sierra Leone region. So when they got there, they were speaking Arabic and writing what is called the Jami script. Now they go back to when the Moors first invaded. We go back to the 7th century, where they first invaded into West Africa and had horse trades and different trades come through there. So once the English get there, it wasn't until 1841 when they come with the Niger expedition. 1788, the African Association, which is to discover the interior parts of Africa, because at that time they had no idea of the interior parts, only the outskirts. And we read that through the Royal African Company, as they didn't find any gold or riches, and they wanted to throw the program away. But the governor, I'm sorry, that was there for 10 years, said that they never had been outside the walls of the actual ports that they created there. And those people, those indigenous Africans who had babies by the Europeans, and we had people from Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Long Island, Rhode Island. I want to throw that in there because they always make it as if it was just the Europeans, but the people from the 13 colonies of what we call New England were also had stocks inside of these trading companies, and a lot of these trading companies actually came from here and not there, because even here you have New London, Connecticut, you have Bristol, Connecticut, you have Bristol, Rhode Island. Well, these are the places where they built the boats from. So I just have Mystic, Connecticut, the largest maritime museum in the world, and this is where they built the timber, the wood, the boats from. And Rhode Island, Long Island, Bristol, Rhode Island is right off the coast of the Atlantic, and that's where they really took to the warehouses in. But the names Bristol, we know that because the Bristol in Europe, their maritime didn't pick up until later, late 19th century, 20th century. And I found it out as I went to Bristol in Europe. And so I traveled to get the research, and that's what they had led me to.
Yeah.
But I just said that, I apologize, just to close. I said that because there was Portuguese, and then the French, the Huguenots, you spoke of the Huguenots, that'll be more French Protestants coming out of the Calvinist movements.
Yeah. This is awesome. It's incredible history you've got. I wanted to say one thing that just adds on a little bit, but like one of the challenges about thinking about I guess I would say the kind of idea of race is that it's supposed to be maybe pure, is that people are moving around all the time in this history. And one of the really powerful stories I encountered were these Irishmen who had been captured in the Mediterranean, North African and Muslim pirates. And then they converted to Islam and then got their own boats and went back and raided Ireland.
They did the same thing, exactly. Yeah.
And so, but they took all these Irish people and who then became fully part of like Morocco. So like if you were trying to, they're like to try to say Morocco or Moroccans had always been there. There's all these people who have been incorporated in over centuries of this trafficking of people. And for that matter, then people ended up in Ireland who were from North Africa too. So it's kind of the idea that there's going to be a pure bloodline is deceptive. And I think it's hard. You can try, but the history is people.
right.
People moving a lot, and that really it makes it a richer story.
Right.
Richer story. It's not a problem. It's interesting. That's what we want.
Yeah, it just makes it more tedious, because
it's hard.
Any port city, we'll find a problem in any port city or trade city. We'll find that problem. As Morocco was once a Phoenician colony before the Moors, even a lot of people think the Moors inception started in Morocco. No, it's not true. The Moors came there to invade what was already there. You had Celts during the Iron period that was there. You had different figures of so
all kinds of people conflicting. It's not
but more than century.
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating, really rich story. I guess I wanted to ask, well, like when you think about, I guess the thing that I also looked at in my book that I'm curious what you all make of. One of the things that gives whiteness its power and is that its mutability. It can change over time. And that is, it's like revisable. It's always been revised, who is white, who's not. And that's kind of the way it's been able to become powerful. But the other thing is that people, when white people become, one way they express their perceived authority, I'm not saying it is that, is partly by when they start inventing their own identities and basically steal the identities of the people they've conquered. And there's this one, so back to Peter Williamson, he was this radical, but he also then, he sold his book by dressing up as a Delaware Indian and pretending to be a Delaware.
American.
And
it's just kind of messed up. Like he's playing Indian, so-called.
Well, go back to Morocco too,
Yeah, but like people are like, I guess is what I found. It's really interesting and kind of a mess. People are actually moving around, what it is to be a Moroccan or an Irish person, and then also people are more often that's white people who are doing this, but like who are pretending to be other people they're not.
Right.
And that even so, this is the whole history of blackface, but also basically taking things from indigenous peoples' culture and history. The so-called improved order of red men. This is this little group, right, in the 19th century, and they're mostly Irish people. They're mostly.
I apologize that. Yeah. I apologize because I usually don't get to talk to people about these type of topics. So like
apologize, man.
Red men.
There's a lot. You got to
Easton.
The other thing,
1758 Treaty of Easton. That's they brought in over 500 different chiefs and to settle. They really didn't want the Lenape to sign with to ally with the French, so they gave them land. They pushed them off into Wyoming and Pennsylvania. But out of that, they had Tammany. But the Order of Red Men do everything that American Indian. They dress like the American Indian. The women's order to them is the Order of Pocahontas. So you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
1850s. They were created same time that the Eastern Stars. Okay.
Well, they pretended, but they didn't really know. I'm more critical of them.
Okay.
This one group, the Improved Order of Red Men, and I'm looking at this group in there were these Irish miners out in Nevada City. And they were Paiute Indian tribe #1, but they didn't know anything about the Paiute people.
Right.
The culture, they didn't know the language. They had actually just attacked them a few years earlier, and then they pretended
that they were them.
They were them, and I feel like that is a story. That's like there was military conquest, and then there was the cultural conquest that they were trying to take. And the Paiute people, Winnemucca didn't have any. He was like, he pushed back, like that is bullshit. But like they were.
And it's hundreds of those stories. And
that's a common theme. So I don't know.
What
to me, but not
One of the things that I found helpful, right?
Yeah.
Because in other words, in the history, right, we have all of these different treaties and this, that, and the other, right? And treaties are written, right? So quite naturally, because of the history of that, you know, I couldn't really trust that, right? So I did in the 80s. I went to France. I had, went there with a girlfriend, whatever, and we visited the Louvre museum. And what I noticed was the paintings, the older paintings. Okay, so my background is art, right?
Oh, okay.
So what it told me, because in 1822 they invented photography, right?
Wow.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's a long time.
prior to that, if you wanted to capture a moment of history, you had to paint it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of those paintings exist in the Louvre and in the British Museum. And what you see is you see a very different picture, right? Because a lot of times those artists were commissioned by the captains of the ship or whatever to prove to the king and the queen and what have you what was going on in the Americas. So you may find that researching in that area, the area of the art prior to photography, may you know help
Familiar with
bring some
Thomas
stuff about.
It's a great suggestion. You know, because I did not do that work. I have a good colleague who is actually doing that work now, and she just presented her work here.
But I can see your passion, and that's a
no,
wonderful
I
thing.
want it. I want
It's a
to
wonderful
understand
thing.
it. I don't.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I guess for me, I've always felt, and I just, you know, one reason I'm interested in this is partly because I lived overseas. I lived in Greece for several years, and I learned. Well, it was 1986, and there was a big rally downtown in Thessaloniki, and I like what? And some friends took me down there, and it was 100,000 people celebrating the anniversary of the Haymarket 7. These are the 7 anarchists who were tried and unfairly convicted of a crime they didn't commit and hung. But I was learning U.S. history from the outside looking in.
There you go.
And that's really when I realized, you know, I want to be an historian. Because these Greek friends were teaching me about my history in a way that I could not see. I had not seen. I mean, I'd heard of the Haymarket 7, but I didn't know how or why they were so powerful as figures to the Greek people at that moment. And they were the Haymarket
7. Was it bloodline?
No, they just knew the history. These were.
No, I mean the reason that they were so prominent, the people that they were speaking of.
They had just read the history. These were, you know, 7 anarchists. None of them were Greek, but it was a moment in Greece where they wanted the United States to get rid of its bases, and you know, that was the slogan. And so they had chosen. I guess they had chosen a group of Americans that they identified with. They were all immigrant workers. A couple of them were Italian, one Irishman. I don't think any were Greek. And they were seeing in the history of the nation I had lived in, history that I was only dimly visible to many Americans. And I was inspired. I guess I was really inspired by that, because I feel like we can, as much as we do know from the inside out, we need to see it from the outside in. Maybe that's the double vision that W.E. Du Bois talks about. Not really. He's talking about the necessity of like survival.
Sure.
If you're Black in the country, but no, and to me is an opportunity to understand that richness and that complexity. And I should say, as a student of history, I'm still a student.
Yeah.
I'm learning literally, and the archive kicked my ass. It was humbling.
I wouldn't use W. Du Bois as a good example, because he was
double consciousness.
he was basically paid for. If we go through his records, he used numbers from people that weren't his. He had numbers all the way up to 100 million in the slave trade. He was funded by Joel Springham. That's the founder of NAACP. There's also the guy who sent him over to France for the conference to make sure he silenced the Negro from speaking about what their experiences in World War I. Which also was paid. So the Pan African Congress comes in 1919, the year after, which was also paid for by Joel Springham. Now, the relationship began at Harvard. Joel Springham's brother met the boys in Harlem.
Do you know this book by my friend and colleague Adrienne Lent Smith? She wrote a great book about Black veterans in World War I and how incredibly powerful they were in building a freedom struggle in the United States right after the war.
Okay, now I'm not familiar with the book, but I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, Adrienne Lent Smith. She's awesome. She's a terrific historian. So, listen, I appreciate your skepticism. Some of you have been quite skeptical of like what official history is, and I appreciate that. I mean, for me, I can say as an historian, I believe in better history that's more, inclusive,
tangible,
that explains complexity. That's what I'm striving to write, and that's what I'm striving to understand. And I don't want to mythologize. The reason being that mythologies have so often been to hurt people who don't deserve it. The mythologies have been just like history.
One second. I want 1 second, brother. I apologize. I wanted to say this to Doc. I think a way that you can do that and get real results is something you said earlier about the bloodline. If we stick to the bloodline, then we can trace it back. We already become historians because we're looking in the past, but it connects the dots that are missing. So I ask you this question. Since your topic is more about the white race, how they empower the. I ask you this: what year did your family get to America? If you don't mind me asking.
My family?
Yes, sir.
So, different bloodlines. We're a bunch of French, Swedish, English, Irish, and there is some Asian, sort of Central Asian, but we don't really know. We haven't been able to find out who they are. But what we've been able to find out mostly through genealogy is just that we were all farmers, for every corner of them.
I mean, like, do you know what year they got here?
So the Peck came over in the early 19th century, settled in Pennsylvania. My great grandfather, George Washington Peck, fought. He was a radical abolitionist. He fought in the Civil War. He fought in the Grand Army of the Republic. He took a bullet at Gettysburg.
Okay. I heard of the.
And the Bible saved his life.
I'm familiar with the Peck surname. But the Pecks, some of the that I've read about were swarthy people. Have you found that in your genealogy or your search?
I haven't. The thing is, I've been doing as a professional historian. I've been doing these bigger, like, history of ideology. I haven't done the family work that but other relatives have. But I would say, we're not. We don't really have photographic evidence, but I do know this. They were really just dirt poor.
Yeah, descriptions of them.
Really poor.
Descriptions of them being swarthy. I do have it.
Interesting. I would anything you've got. My God, anything you've got would be great. And then on the my grandmother's side, the Swedes are Sustrom, and they actually came through Denmark. They went straight to Minnesota.
Minnesota, okay.
They were.
So they come through a program because we know they had like Hebrew aid program, especially during the homestead, 1860s. They brought over a lot of Eastern Europeans at that time, and now these people were fair skinned, as we see from the records coming out.
My family, I mean, on the Swedish side, they were, part of the Europeans who were encroaching on Lakota Sioux, and then later, my father grew up in the Shoshone Nation in Wyoming. That's where he grew up.
So basically, they were part of the homestead. They benefited from the homestead act.
They didn't directly benefit because they came a little bit in the 1870s.
Okay, later.
Yeah, a little bit later, but they had my dad had they were in the I had a dairy in Wyoming, and it was I mean everyone, it was a small town, everyone knew each other. So I guess I don't know. I mean it's a complicated story, and it's a history of in my own family of, I would say, I wouldn't call it, I would say, uncertainty and a desire to know. Like I want to know.
Mm-hmm. I have a question for my historian friend.
Yeah.
Well, it seems that you're pretty knowledgeable about the way whiteness came to be over here on what we call Turtle Island. So my questions for you is that how can we broaden this information to the rest of the Europeans that are for the rest of the Europeans that are on this land who still partake in the ideology of them being supreme because of that particular ideology that has nothing to do with anything other than supremacy, so far as is holding one people down and pushing another people up. So how can we make that inclusive enough for the rest of the Europeans here to understand that, so maybe they can break this chain and slow down on the madness that's being caused, for the last 400 or 500 years? Because even though they have adopted this concept, the people on this land have never considered them as enemies to the point that anything is being done, because we're constantly being bombarded by people who have been brainwashed into a concept of superiority that doesn't have anything to do with anything. So how can we make this broader so the rest of the people that look like you can understand and stop the madness?
I love that question. Thank you. I wish I had a quick answer. I feel like my book, that's why I wrote my book. I wanted to show how it is this idea, and I think the part that is helpful for me is I do a lot of work on voting rights because people are getting disfranchised left and right now. And it ain't much, our voting rights, but we don't, this thing we call democracy, but I listened to a lot of people, and I think that's what partly inspired my research, was that people are feeling like a lot of white people, not all, but a lot of them, have a sense of grievance, which is weird to me, because they're the beneficiaries of the unequal. They have a sense they are the ones being victimized. And I do think our current president's a perfect example of that. He is a kind of he is a professional victim. He's just a grievance all the time. And so how does that actually work in people's brains? And for me, it's helpful to know the origins of the story, because it was dividing people rather than like seeing our common humanity, that as actually where racism it legitimates all of this crap that you're describing. And so the way to break it is, how do you fight racism? Is by understanding that there are other ways of seeing common humanity, and it doesn't mean we're all the same. It's recognizing that there is there's a bigger justice project. There's a project to stop human trafficking today. I work with a lot of scholars and activists who are seeking to stop the buying and selling of people today. Modern slavery is a big problem. Big problem. It's not the same as the slave trade or whatever, and all of the different things you've been talking about. But more people are being bought and sold today than probably ever in human history.
Let me just get this in, Horace. I think the very fact that we're having this conversation is a beginning to some type of change, because to have a Top Cats, to have Mafia Shakur, our young brother, to have a even younger brother, Mr. Wells here, and we've all learned something. We can all learn from each other. But I know this, if we don't get it together, we're jeopardizing the safety of this country, because if you're fighting from the inside, it's easy for somebody to smack you from the outside.
Oh, well, one of the things is that, you know, like
your question,
like
fix it. I don't know.
Like
more of a comment. Go ahead, Mr. Wells.
One of the things is, like, you know, you hear these horror stories about you know, people going to the hospital and they're going in for you know, they got a rotator cuff problem, and then you know the surgeon takes out their liver, so you know, right? So the point is that our medical profession has misdiagnosed mental illness. They should broaden that to include racism, because it is a mental illness disease. And if you can't address a disease
like a drug addict,
there ain't no way you can get there.
You know,
like a drug addict.
No, I think that is so spot on. You know, I think of white victimhood as it's like a drug. It's like Oxycontin, man. It's a shortcut to people who are suffering. They get to blame someone else. They're the ones victimized, rather than a harder question.
Yeah,
and it's like it is a disease.
Yeah,
a scholar, right? One of my colleagues who does public health is looking here at Duke is looking at. Actually, the fantastic scholar, but he quantifies the effects of physical effects of racism on people who are, you know, people of color, but also, and this is interesting, on people who are racist, and it's bad for you.
Yeah,
when you carry poison, it's bound to spill on you.
Yeah.
Hey, look here, guys. We got to wrap this up. Top Cats, you gonna give us the final word? I know you there.
Yeah,
you started.
It was just getting good for me. It was just getting good for me. I heard something they caught me my ear. As far as the political part, what makes you want to get into it for the political part? When we look at it, as far as this race, and to answer the brother, I think his name was Horace's question as well. It's not just Caucasians, it's our people. We are destroyed by lack of knowledge.
Absolutely.
And for that lack of knowledge, the what did it say? Hosea 4:6, my people are destroyed for they forsake knowledge, I forsake them.
I reject them.
Brother, he probably don't have bright thoughts about Trump and many others, but Trump did say one thing. He said that Negro African Americans, which is another, you know, misclassification. He said they need to do their history. You need to look into your history, because he said they built the White House, they built America. What I want to get down to the political part is that's what we see. That was the whole reason for the racism, because you have the 13 colonies coming down into the South, which is another government of their own, another country. So when Thomas Jefferson attacked Georgia and Florida, he was attacking a different country outside of the 13 colonies. U.S. expansion was started in 1812, 1815, 1817, you have Alabama and the establishment of statehood, which gives U.S. jurisdiction in certain parts, and others outside it would be considered Indian, not taxed. But my point to that is we don't see the political parties were brought it because they were outnumbered in the South. The Union were outnumbered. So they brought in the White League. They brought in the KKK. They brought in the red shirts. And, you know, people of these, to stop people from voting, they put in laws where you had to be able to read, write, sometimes even pay to vote. They brought in all of these distractions. But at this time, and it might go over a lot of people's head, but the first Klan, the leader, the first dragon of the Ku Klux Klan was a melanated chip. No, it wasn't a Moor.
It was Moor?
No, he ran the Tennessee. He ran some of the most ferocious fighters out of the was it Tennessee?
Pulaski, Tennessee.
Pulaski, Tennessee is where the Klan is gonna come from. They're gonna be Klan members. But if you read J.A. Rogers, he speaks about them looking like us. A lot of them didn't want to take their hoods off. Another thing we have to understand, they went under the Protestant faith or Baptist faith. Same as the connection with the AME church. That's why if someone get hung, they're not. John Hopkins put out, they said, if you want to travel, find the lynching trail, just follow missing stolen land. You're not getting hung because of your color. You're getting hung because of the land that's in the mineral resources that's under your feet. Another thing is how they separated us, because at this time in the South, I say in the South, white people voted Republican. Okay, all the way in Wilmington, 1898, the Wilmington riot, where they created a few. The Democrats created what's called a fusion party. They're going to bring in the white class, or this class that's coming over from Ellis Island, and they're going to give them these rights. Now we're seeing them get this, what will later be called white supremacy. They, you know, they're able to be in a class system over the indigenous people. And so we see them clash again through the labor movements, but and the red summers, the burnings of the towns, Negro towns, the sanctuaries. But I do want to point out the fact that in the South, whites voted mostly Republican until 1898, when the Democrats created what's called a fusion party, and they started allotting them with these lands and started giving them more opportunities under class system under white. But later in the 20th century, it'll become more prominent as they bring in more people. 1922, you have nationalization, and then come 1924, that's the first time they brought in the Plain Indians, who in the 60s we'll know as Native Americans. That term coming to them. But just a little on that and how race, but to Brother Horace, I think we need to be more educated on who we are, and not as a whole, but in ourselves, our family story. I tell a lot of people, you know, we read books to try to find out who we are instead of becoming historians. I feel like we should become my stories. What is your story? What are the contributions have your family made to the world? A lot of people don't know. You don't know where it gets cut off at. You don't know what happened to you if something did happen. Forced migration, as we see through the South to Kansas to the West, as they expand, as you expanded, a lot of our people families went west. But I did want to throw that in there, that we need to get more educated on ourselves and not leave it up to anyone else to tell us, because a lot of the times at home, the family tells us when we're at the age of understanding, they tell us who we were, who their parents were. That's how a lot of us can say, oh, I have Indian in my family. My grandma said that her mother was Indian. My grandmother was Choctaw Indian, Cherokee Indian. And then we go to school and into the world, and there's an identity or there's, propaganda that's put out, and we have to circle the right answer in order to make it through school, even though it wasn't, who we really were. So we adopted a lot of these things, these titles that then tie back to our surname, and our surname is very important because that's why inheritors go. And so yes, sir.
Let me say something, Tom Captain. I'm gonna leave it alone.
Hold tight, Horace. Hold tight,
Okay.
Horace. We got to wrap this thing up. I want you to hit the like and the subscribe button. I got to do a commercial, man. I wrote a book, I Am Black Wall Street. Top Cats, you taught me well. And that goes into, you mentioned Florida. A lot of us don't know Florida wasn't a U.S. property until 1831. Florida, if you made it to Florida, you were free. And this is the latest one. I don't know how you feel about the title, Top Cats, but it's Black Blueprint.
I'm okay with it. You know, Texas, I'm a Texan. From Florida to Texas, 1829, Vicente Railroad. If you make it to Texas, you can make it to Mama Freedom. You're going to have a lot of fighters to fight on side of you. This was one of your heroes, so I made sure I won. That's John Horace or Warren Kabbalah.
I plan to get my ticket to Houston this week. We're coming there for November. Horace, and then we get Gunther, and then we're gonna get up out of here. Come on, Horace. I don't want Chicago. Hey, look, this cat from Chicago. He from the Chi. Okay. You don't mess with them cats from the Chi, man. They got a big posse.
Well, no, man. You know, hey, man. I respect my brother, man. Top Cats, man. 100%. And man, if you heard me on Donnie's show previously, man, hey, man, don't beat me up for not adding you to the list, but I damn sure I'll put you on there, you know what I'm saying, at a later date. So you was coming, man. You know what I'm saying? But I just want to say that, yeah, man, and I'm most definitely with you, man, on us gaining that knowledge. But even still, we got to deal with people that got guns once we get this knowledge, or we have to go to these institutions where we may be like medical apartheid, or then we still have to deal with the foods that we eat in the poor communities that are having all these destructive chemicals in them. So I'm most definitely with you so far as gaining the knowledge, but I'm saying in the part of the people who are in control of this thing because of this narrative, they need to be reached to the point where they can slow down with the shenanigans, man, so we can all be in a harmonious state.
Now, that's true, OG Horace, and I agree with you on that. But a lot of those things can be fixed at home. That's so, like you said, grandma grew up. When we grew up, you from the South. You probably got some Mississippian roots. You out of Chicago.
Oh yeah, for sure.
They had gardens. They grew gardens. So we had our own chicken coops. I'm a country boy. We got our own cattle out there. We gonna cut the cattle. We'll cook it under the ground the same way the Indians did when the Spanish got here to Texas. So it's still things we I think we're in a different space today now because what they call them Gen Z this generation today is different. You know, they're together. They're more together culturally. You know, they talk the same. They speak the same. They're going to the same schools now. You know, they're best friends now. You know, it's not how when we grew up, or when you're probably older than I am. But even when you grew up, you know, but a lot of back then we were more self-sufficient, even owning our own family businesses, you know, and having our family land and cemeteries and things that a lot of us let go because, you know, the lack of knowledge or the lack of leadership there in the family to uphold those things instead of us, you know, looking for help outside ourselves.
One thing I'd like to say is in reference to bloodlines, in reference to blood, in reference to DNA, these are vital things to know. But another vital thing to know is what in you, specifically in you, can perceive bloodlines, DNA. What is it? What is that can even perceive that? What miracle? What grace is that?
Nothing. It's the greatest thing. It's what unlocks the key to the mystery. Nothing greater than that. I have
it brings the healing, no matter what.
Yeah, it brings the healing, but it
For
also
all
brings you
people.
back home.
For all people.
But yeah, this is universal. This can
Absolutely.
this is universal. This has no
Absolutely.
line, and that's why I say this is
Absolutely.
the only thing that can work, because you, in order for you to be here, you would have to come through someone else. So someone has to be with you, and so that in itself is nothing higher than that. And once you know the story there, you have then found true knowledge itself. We can know all the world history we know, but if we don't know anything about ourselves, if we don't know who our third great grandmother, our fifth great grandmother, our migrations, how did I get to whatever state I was born in? Was my family already here? So many different branches to it. I think these are the things we should focus on. That's why I feel like it's nothing higher. I had a saying, genealogy is the highest form of spirituality. Why do I say that? Because it's the only thing that allows you to worship that in which you come from. And it's within, and it's you, your own personal story. No one else can share that answer unless y'all have the same mother and father. Without that, you have that's why it's the hardest journey. Instead of just picking a religion or picking a God or picking a doctrine. No, it's about you, and it's the only thing that can empower you, and it's the key that unlocks that mystery to who you really are. Because in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from. And a tree with no roots bears no fruit. I'll leave out with that. Appreciate you,
Good deal.
Appreciate you, Doc. Appreciate that. Great conversation.
Yeah, it's a great conversation. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Dr. Peck, I know you weren't expecting this.
No, I loved it. I wanted a spirited conversation about history, and that's what this was. So I'm grateful. Thank you. I was going to say, I had one thing I was going to say, just is that I teach 2 classes, and the reason I teach these, one is the history of gardening, and it struck me what you were saying about people have lost, this young people today, they don't know how to garden. They don't know their connection to the land. And
many don't. Some do, though.
Some do, but most don't.
Please don't get them started, man.
But what is I won't. But I have to say, I love teaching the history of gardening because it's a way to link family history to actual knowledge of the soil and knowledge of the earth, and it's a spiritual class as well as a practical class as well as a history class. So that's actually my favorite class right now. That's where I'm learning the most. So I just combines a lot of the good insights you have shared. So I thank you for that. Thanks for inviting me on, Donnie. And I hope if you're interested in the book, you're welcome to buy it. But and I'm happy to. I may be in Baltimore soon. My best friend lives in Baltimore, so anyhow.
I'll make sure you get a good crab cake.
Dr. Gunther, before I go, Dr. Gunther, the secret. There's always been the secret. The number 100% results is gonna be the bloodlines. Connect the bloodline, follow the bloodlines.
Yeah. And knowing your family history and being able to, if you can find it and reconstruct it. So that's the other thing. I have my students write family histories and that's powerful.
And do family trees. Yeah. Appreciate you for your works and your longevity. Because I know a lot of we may miss a lot of time from our family. We disregard a lot of social activities, because we're students of knowledge, and it it resonated with us, as if it was a covenant we made before we got here. So I want to respect your works, and just to add to it, give you a secret ingredient in there. Because the book is still it's questioned, it makes the mind think. But
yes.
if we want the tangibles like you spoke about earlier, we can't miss if we follow the bloodline.
All right. Thank you for that. All righty. I'm gonna sign off with everyone else here.
Yes,
got
sir.
a team tomorrow morning early at 9, so I'm gonna get ready.
Thank you, Doc.
Thanks so much for this.
All right.
Okay. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Robert, we about to get up out of here, man.
Oh, that's cool. I just want to say hi.
Go.
Sorry I'm late. I had some things to do.
Yes, sir. Shakur, you been Mafia Shakur. This is your show. Come on, point guard.
No, man. I'm just letting the elders do what they think. You know, I can learn and listen as well. You know what I'm saying? I appreciate everybody that was on the panel and sharing what they were sharing. You know, like I ain't here to interrupt or cut nobody off. I was listening and learning as well. Like I say, I know what I know, but I don't know all the details and specifics. You know, Top Cat, he one of the great speakers and all the elders as well. You know what I'm saying? So I'm here to learn and listen as well, so that I can even share that ability to learn and listen with others as well. And I appreciate it. Like I say, man, this was a great show. We can do more research, and we also can do more, intuitive thinking. Like he said, the knowledge of yourself. You know, that's what I come from, the school of knowledge itself. And the more you learn about yourself, you'll find the path to where you're going. Like he said, follow the bloodline. The bloodline leads to a war path because there was war shared over the bloodline. So if you follow the bloodline, you follow the war trail. You'll follow the migrations and, you know, everything according to that.
Right. And I agree totally. I've been on a mission for 20 years, following the blood, following the family, documenting. And it's tiresome, but we got to do it. So it was a good show tonight. I agree.
Hey, everybody, check me out at the Dog Network on YouTube, From Gangs to Gods. Trying to get all of the cats in Chicago to understand, man, that we got a higher sciences right at our fingertips, man, that can unify us, man. Dog Network, From Gangs to Gods.
I will definitely check that out.
Like I said, you can follow me. I'm Mafia Shakur on everything. Mafia Shakur or Son of Baltimore, SUN of Baltimore. You know, I do a multitude of things. So, like I say, I'll catch y'all on the next show, and we're gonna learn some more. We're gonna discuss some more, and you know.
Yes, sir. Where the brother Donnie go, man?
He's still there. I think we wouldn't be still around, I don't think, if he was gone. He's still there.
Right.
Horace, are you in Chicago?
Well, no, sir, brother. I've just left Chicago yesterday because I had to go to Iowa and pick this load up. So actually, I'm in Hillsborough, Tennessee right now, headed to Florida.
Okay. Did you grow up in Chicago?
Southside, yes, sir.
Okay, so you know my people then for sure.
Who was that?
E. Rodney Jones.
Who?
E. Rodney Jones.
Rodney Jones?
Yeah. E.
Rodney what's the
WVON.
Oh yeah, man, WV, yes, sir, man. I grew up on WVON, man. Oh, that's your people.
You grew up on E. Rodney Jones then. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but see, okay. The name didn't necessarily ring a bell, but there's you talking about E. Rodney. Yeah, the light-skinned brother with the glasses.
The relatively light-skinned, you know.
Yeah, light brown-skinned brother, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about, yeah, man. WBON, WGCI. Yeah,
Black
I know,
radio.
yes, sir.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my people. Okay.
Okay, man. Hey, man, it's a small world, brother.
Absolutely.
Again, hit the like and subscribe button. Thank you very much for joining. Robbie, you on the tail end, man. We have to bring you back next time, man.
Oh, yeah. No, it's cool. I'm just looking at the tail end. I'm enjoying it.
Absolutely. Hey there,
all right, well,
Donnie.
I'm going to just go ahead and get out. Since y'all going out.
We're going out.
All right, well,
y'all take it easy.
I'll
see you the next time.
Yes, I'll holler at you brothers, man, on the next
one. Absolutely.
So,
hey,
okay.
Hannibal.
Okay, peace.
Thank you for all of the kind words in the chat. Good evening, world. Great show, guys.
All right, my brother.
Great job.
Okay, brothers. Okay, peace.